Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This is the Technology Whisperers, episode 4 of season 2. Good afternoon. My name is Alistair Ross, and your name is?
Sean Muller.
How are you, Sean?
Oh, another beautiful day in paradise, and we have 3 incredible guests on this episode. I have been literally looking forward to this for the last 2 weeks, just to get us to the point to have this, because I'm so looking forward to what they have to say.
It's not often that I would use the word pumped, but it's kind of very American sounding word, but I'm going to say I'm pumped for this. I'm really excited. So yeah, I've been waiting for this for a very long time. So we have a panel, which is something I don't think we've done on the Technology Whisperers. We've had individuals coming along and chatting about their stuff, but we've never had a panel. And I think this is just a wonderful, wonderful way to do this particular podcast, actually. So this afternoon or this evening's podcast, wherever you're listening, right? Today's podcast is all about cybersecurity and how you get into cybersecurity and the journey that you go through in cybersecurity, but taken from the perspective of the fairer of the sexes. And we have this wonderful panel. And on the panel today, we have Kat Lennox-Steele, who is a cybersecurity associate for Defend, and also co-founder, director of CyberTribe. We also have Sasha Mullins, who is a cybersecurity strategy and risk consultant for CyberCX, and the very excellent Hilary Walton, who is technology strategist for Microsoft, podcaster for digital culture ideas, and also ex-CISO for Cordia. What a panel.
Yeah, incredible
panel. And I love the fact that we've got people here from all different walks of life, all different exposure to cybersecurity through, different ages. So just a great panel to have. So without further ado, what I want to do is, for most of this podcast, shut up for most of it and let you guys drive the podcast. So maybe we could just start with a bit of quick introductions. Tell us a bit about yourself. Tell us a bit about your past. And then maybe we can go into about what cybersecurity means to all of you. So first of all, Kat, I'll give the podcast to you and let you introduce yourself.
Thanks, Alistair. So my name's Kat, and I spent the first 12 years of my career in retail. Decided that I needed to do something else and moved over into technology and cybersecurity as a specialization. So I've been in cybersecurity industry for about 5 years now.
That's wonderful. Really great to hear that transition from something which classically, I guess, we wouldn't associate with a journey into cybersecurity. And then we got somebody there who's really, really made that transition great. I mean, I worked in shoe shops when I was 16, but I don't kind of think that's the same sort of story at all. So let's hear more about that in just a bit. But the next panelist is Sasha Mullins. Sasha, hello.
Hi. Yeah, thanks, Alistair. So yeah, my name is Sasha. I've been in cybersecurity for about, I would say, 3 years, coming up to 3 years now. And I guess we'll go into it in a bit more detail, but essentially I came through university. I found technology. I'd never really come across that beforehand, and I got really excited about it. And from there, I just knew I wanted to be in it, talked to a lot of people, figured out, kind of just fell into cyber, I guess, from a series of different conversations, which I feel like is often the case. It's never a linear path, nor was mine. And yeah, came across into cybersecurity, fell in love with it, and here we are. It's me.
And Sasha, we're going to come back. I want to hear more about what you love about cybersecurity, because I think a lot of times people see it as, oh, that's a lot of work. So if you can give your perspective in it as we go through this, I think that would.
100%.
Yeah. Great. Okay. Thank you very much for that, Sasha. And next up, we have Hilary Walton. Hello there, Hilary.
Hi, everyone. Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Hils, and I've been in cybersecurity, IT, or risk-related roles for probably about the last 11 years. But previously to getting into that, and we can talk about that later, I actually started my career as a psychologist. So again, completely different career, was heading in a completely different direction. And I guess part of that and part of me is that I really like to describe myself as lots of different things. So yes, I am cybersecurity. I'm also technology, but I also have like some directorships. I've got the YouTube channel. I like to, I'm a mum, I'm a wife, I'm lots of different things. And I think that's really important for me, it's important to convey, because I think sometimes people think they need to be just one thing in life, that they've got one direction, one goal, and then that's when people get really wound up and stressed out because they're not reaching that one goal. But I think we need to recognize that those goals can change over time, and that's totally okay, and that you can not just have one direction, but lots of different directions, and see where life takes you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it sounds a bit cliche, right? But life is a journey. And, just when you think it's going to go in this linear path and it's just this nice straight thing and you've got it all worked out, all of a sudden something will come along and it will just completely derail that. And I think that's, certainly sounds like, well, maybe not derail maybe has negative connotations, but really life is all about that different path that you find yourself going down. And it sounds like you've got some great stories there, Hilary. So looking forward to hearing some of that. So in terms of cybersecurity itself, I think cybersecurity has a bit of let's just say the word connotation again, a connotation of being, a very techie sort of sounding thing. And there's, there's lots of, we have this problem, I think, which hopefully we're starting to get out of, but it seems to be a very male dominated, or has traditionally been a very male-dominated industry, and has had a lot of very sort of geeky kind of things. But I would like to start looking or exploring the possibilities that cybersecurity isn't just about the deep, dark technology aspects to it. There's a whole bunch of wonderful aspects to the industry. So, Sasha, perhaps I'll start with yourself. Oh, Hilary, I think, okay.
Hilary.
Let's
go straight to Hilary. I was looking
Sorry,
at whose face
I'd love to jump in, because
go
I
for it.
think, cyber is really interesting. It's got lots of complicated terms. It's got lots of crazy systems that do different things. And I think that can be really off-putting, not just for women getting into cyber, but actually for people in general. Like some of the boards that I sit with, or even some of the exec teams, when the cyber topic comes up, they all kind of back off and they're kind of really not sure how to approach it. So I think in general, the subject seems confusing, and maybe that's a technology thing in general. But what I think people need to understand is it's not rocket science. It's completely learnable. And there's actually a whole range of cybersecurity topics and cybersecurity roles that people can explore. So I like to think about it as being divided into two different spheres, basically. So there's this one sphere that, yes, it is more technical. It's where your pen testers might play, or your security architects, or security engineers and analysts who are hands-on tools and really, in it with the technology and looking in logs and things like that. But then there's this other side of cybersecurity as well, which is much more about, risk management in general. There's policy writing. There's also lots of comms, like marketing, like security, awareness, communication, almost community building that happens on this side as well. And I think, people understanding that the breadth of cybersecurity is really important, because even if you go in just as one side of that cybersecurity, kind of type, you can also make your way into lots of other different types as you become more interested, or even try all of them out over your lifetime. I think that's really important to consider.
Hilary, I think it's a really good point you bring up, because we tend to, in other parts of the organizations, technology parts of the organizations, we're starting to embrace this idea that we need to tell the story better. We need to have designers. We need to have differing viewpoints. And I think the point you bring up is that cybersecurity is no different than that. We have all of those additional capabilities that we need to do across it. And yeah, I think traditionally we've thought of, you're right, the cybersecurity guys are the guys that sit in that dark room in the back of the building, and they're constantly looking at ones and zeros on compute. Yeah. But the reality is that there's a massive amount of work within cybersecurity. And by the way, because we viewed cybersecurity that way, a lot of people haven't taken it seriously. A lot of people haven't invested in it. The storytelling behind it has scared business people in such a way that they don't know how to deal with it. So I think you're absolutely right.
I think that was definitely one of the key things that I learned as well. And that moving from uni to the workplace to a cybersecurity specialized workplace was at uni in my degree, we had one paper for cybersecurity, so they were shoving everything into this one paper, and they did it really well. But it was very much at that overview level. So you go, oh, cool, yeah, cybersecurity is something to look into. That sounds exciting. That's something new. It's something changing, and then you go into it. And when I was in a large organization that had had a relatively large cybersecurity team, but even then I was going, oh wow, there's a lot more to cyber. There's a lot more avenues of cyber, and there's a lot of different sort of specializations that you can go into. And then there's like a whole bunch of technology teams. From that point, it seemed like there was a million more avenues that you could go down with technology. And then I went into a cybersecurity specific company, and I went, oh, all of these little avenues or topics. I realized you can have entire practices dedicated to these specific concepts, which might have just been, a specific project in the previous organization, or a line or a sentence mentioned in the university paper. So it just, you go down deeper and you realize how much of a world it is. And I often see it as like a world, an entire world sitting within the world of technology. It's just that whole, yeah.
Yeah, actually, in fact, your story probably might as well just jump into that. Sasha, your story and how you got into cyber, and then the roles that you went through, that's kind of how it started for you, isn't it? You started off in what, a fairly technical role. Do you want to talk about that first, and then how your role evolved over time?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I didn't, if I was in high school looking at myself, I definitely wouldn't have been, I would have been absolutely shocked looking at myself in cyber. We didn't really have technology, I would say, as a subject at high school at that point, unless it was sort of food or sewing related. And so I got to university, and ironically, Hilary, I started with psychology. I started with psychology and marketing, and I realized very quickly that psychology had maths involved, and I thought, that's not for me, thank you. So I dropped that, and then I picked up media studies, which I did at high school as well, and I loved that because I was doing a Bachelor of Arts alongside my commerce degree, and I loved the creative sort of side of it, and the critical thinking side that media studies brought in. It wasn't something that I wanted to necessarily pursue, but I also picked up information systems just because we had to do it as part of our commerce degree. But it had a coding element, and I had never experienced hyper-focusing to that level of my life. And that's, I realized, fast forward to a couple of years later, I get diagnosed with ADHD. So that starts to add up. But yeah, I got so hyper-focused, and I started I just fell in love with the subject, and I did really well for the first time in uni in a subject, because I was terrible, well, what I consider to be terrible, and academically I went for the social aspect. I wasn't enjoying anything, and then I ended up doing really well in this, and then I started thriving in other areas because I found something that I was really passionate about. But I ended up tutoring in that as well, and because I wanted to sort of see the same shift in that paper. I also needed money, but I started tutoring in that subject, and I started surrounding myself with people that were really passionate and came from different walks of life as well. And I got really into information systems, really into the technology side of things. And all I knew from there was that I wanted and I needed to be in the technology industry. I had no idea at what place in technology I would be in, because at that stage I was going, oh, I love the technical, but I'm not a full coder. I love it. I love the ideas. I love everything about it, but I know that this isn't me. I also need to be in front of people. I know that I'm a people person. I need to be, so there were so many different factors that I was going, I have no idea where I'm going to end up. And so then I did a cybersecurity paper, which I thought was really interesting. I still had no idea at that point what I wanted to do, but I ended up getting coffee with the lecturer, who just said, cybersecurity is pretty cool. And I was like, okay, let's give that a go. And then I did a Summer of Tech, which is an organization that does internships, and they are awesome. And I got an internship with ANZ Bank through them. And within, I would say, the first 30 minutes with my mentor, I had probably learned the entire university paper that I had done, and then more. So everything since then has just been absolutely new. And I started off in that internship, I started off with the consultants. So I was at more of that sort of people angle, internally focused consulting. And then they wanted to keep me, but they didn't necessarily have capacity in the team at that point. And I still had some uni left, but I was so committed to just being there that they ended up finding a role for me to do alongside uni. It was an identity and access management role, something that I had never really come across before. I didn't know what, I think my boss said to me, my to-be boss, he said, okay, that's exciting. It's super exciting that you're going to come across to my team. Identity and access management is super cool. How familiar are you with using Active Directory? And I was like, what's Active Directory? And he went, oh no. And so that was a great start. But it ended up being amazing. And it had a lot more of the, I would say, technical aspect, when we were using things like PowerShell, and we were doing privileged, I was doing privileged user access management. So it was very much in that space. And there was so much to do, and a small team at that stage. And it was really exciting, and it was a lot of learning. And I got to learn more of that technical side and those technical tools, and while still doing sort of people-focused stuff. But it got to a stage where I wanted to see more as well, change it up. And I thought, I'm early enough in my career that I can absolutely move sideways. I think it's the best thing to do. And I had a lot of people. I'm so fortunate that I had a lot of mentors along the way to help me to get to that mindset as well, because it's very hard to just look up and go, I could just keep going up from here, and getting a lot of perspective and going and the benefits of going sideways. So I jumped across from that role to what was supposed to be actually security operations. But then 3 weeks before I started my role at my company that I'm at now, CyberCX, I got offered to shift across for 10 weeks onto a strategy project in the strategy team. So I went, okay, why not? And then they said that you would go back to security operations following that. And I was like, okay, why not? And then they said, and by the way, the first 2 weeks of this is going to be in Switzerland. And I was like, it's what? So I never went back to security operations. But no, it was just because I loved the strategy side. I loved the creativity that it brought of having from starting from nothing, from just starting with a problem and creating an entire solution. I love that. But it's such a different side to it, as you said, Alistair and Sean, looking at the different sides, and that shift from a more technical role to a less technical, non-technical role it's been incredible, I think. And it's been a massive shift, but I feel like there is a lot of crossover in my day-to-day. And I think that the lines are extremely blurred. And I think that there is just both types of roles meet different types of mindsets and different types of personalities and everything like that. I think there's so many factors to it, but I wouldn't have it in any other way, because there's definitely I've loved both roles, I would say.
Great. Fantastic. I'll come back to one of the aspects about that in a bit later, but I just wanted to offer up the floor to Kat. Kat, you want to tell us about your entry. So I believe there's a bit of a different story about your entry, and obviously you went from retail, from starters there, into cybersecurity. You want to talk about that just a little?
Yeah, so retail was where I was at because I was led to believe that I was always just going to have a job, never a career. And I was working at Dick Smith stores where I met Ash, and we all got made redundant and the stores closed down. So I had to go find another role, figured retail management's where I am at, what I'm good at, so I'll find another one. And 6 months after finding another job, Ash and I were together as a couple, and Ash went, I'm sick of you being miserable, and I want you to go and do something, because you've talked about your regret of never studying or going to uni, get a degree, so I want you to go do something. So I had to go and do a certificate and university entrance because I didn't have UE, and I was an older student, so they do an assessment, make sure you're going to cope with the work. And I went in thinking I was going to do medical imaging. And then the more I talked to people at uni and learned more about the different faculties, and Ash was working in cybersecurity, it was their first job out of uni. So they were coming home with all these really cool stories. And I was going, well, actually, I really loved working at Dick Smith and talking to people about technology and translating that into some way that they could understand. And Ash is coming home with all these cool stories. Why don't I try and get into a computer degree? I applied for a couple. One of them, they wanted me to take a scientific maths course over the entire summer, but I'm a mum and I lived in Wellsford, and they wanted me to travel to Auckland daily for 5 days a week for a 1 hour class over 6 weeks in the summer. And I was like, I can't do it. So,
what year was that, Kat? Pre-COVID?
2018, 2017. Yeah.
I wonder if it'd still be that way given the years that have passed in COVID and so forth. But it's very interesting that they asked you to come in like that. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
especially for a maths class that they could literally do online without any problems whatsoever.
Yeah, exactly. No, so then I applied at Unitech because they were a more hands-on type of degree anyway, and they did have classes that focused a lot on cybersecurity, so you could kind of tailor your study to lean more towards cybersecurity, because they were obviously developing their cybersecurity diploma at the time, so they were trying to really get into that space. So thankfully I had Ash to support me in my studies and help me along, because Ash has a master's in digital forensics and information systems. But I totally get Sasha's hyper focus on the coding thing. I'd often find that in my uni papers, I would solve my coding problems in my sleep. So I would wake up and be like, I know how to do this thing now. And I'd go and do it and it would work. And it would be great.
Amazing.
But I also recognized that coding probably wasn't my thing. My brain didn't quite work like that. It was a little bit more on the creative, because to me, cybersecurity is not just about technology, it's about people and process as well. And people's a massive chunk of that. So I figured there must be something else in it. And I applied for a position that came up on LinkedIn to be a unicorn. And that was for a guy who was doing a little cybersecurity consultancy startup business, James Dickinson. And he needed somebody to help with general business stuff like bookkeeping, calendar management, helping him schedule appointments, etc. And I thought, well, it's a part-time job while I'm at uni, great, and it'll get me some exposure to the industry and how it actually works. So started off with 10 hours part-time a week. And as I slowly got more of a feel for things, and he was willing to hand stuff off to me, that grew in terms of 15, 20 hours. And then once I graduated, I moved into full-time work with Unisphere, which ended up splitting into 4 companies, one of which was Cybertribe that I founded with James to focus on cybersecurity awareness training and policy. Because policies are a thing that is very well understood in other areas of the world, but not so much in New Zealand. And fleshing out their cybersecurity assessment framework and turning it into a reusable thing. So I spent 3 years doing that, and it was heaps of fun and so much to learn. But then I transitioned into a more hyper-focused cybersecurity role with Defend, just purely for the exposure to the different types of customers and the different learning environment, because it was a small startup. There was a total of 12 people versus Defend that's got 140 plus people now. Yeah, that's how I ended up in cybersecurity. So I definitely fell into it, so to speak. I don't know if you've ever seen a map of career progressions in cybersecurity, like a mind map, but they're absolutely massive. So I thought to myself, it doesn't matter where I land, I'm never going to be bored. There's always
that's very true. But I'm loving the story so far, how they both came from slightly different places, but there's just a wonderful picture of evolution in the roles, and how you came to be in the places that you have come to. So just great stories so far. And we have one other story as well from a third panelist, Hilary. I'm really looking forward to this story. Started in psychology, you said, yeah?
Yeah, that's right. So I've got my master's in applied psychology, but if I look back, even during school, I always did lots of the STEM subjects, chemistry, bio, physics. But it wasn't until I hit uni and started to try to do those at uni that I realized it wasn't me. It just got super hard all of a sudden. But my degree ended up being a science degree. So it could have gone arts, it could have gone science, but landed on the science side for the work that I had done in that space. So I guess I am, I do have that STEM aspect to me that kind of sits between those two worlds. But yeah, so I was an organizational psychologist. I graduated and I joined the Royal New Zealand Air Force as a psychologist for them. So it was very much in the sort of HR space though, if you like. So I was doing lots of selection and recruitment of pilots and air crew, debriefing people as they were coming out of their operations overseas, and lots of training of leadership and things like that. I then moved to Australia and did some psychology work there, and then over to the UK. And it was while I was working in the UK that I made this kind of transition into security, which was really odd for a psychologist at the time. But I was fortunate because the consultancy I was working for had a relationship in with MI5, and they were doing some of their assessment processes, some very early stage processes. And they were like, we need a psychologist, we need a culture change person to come and help us out in our behavioural science team, and we need them to work on this security culture project. So being a keen New Zealander, I put my hand up because I thought, that sounds like an amazing story to tell my kids that I work for MI5. Yes, please, I'll do it. Whereas the other psychs in the business were like, oh, security, that's a bit weird. It sounds like a bit of a, not an upwards kind of career move, but kind of a side, a bit of a weird one. So I ended up doing that role with them for about a year and a half. And it was great because security culture was really new, and the whole purpose of the role was to help organizations understand their security culture through some assessments, and then helping to talk to them about what kind of initiatives they could do in their organization to improve security culture. How do you make messages stick? People don't follow policy, they don't seem motivated, all the stuff that Kat's done a really good job in recently. And yeah, so based on that role, discovered security. And I was also working in with lots of experts within MI5 around information security, personnel security, and also physical security. So I got exposed to the lot. And then based on my role with MI5, I was then asked to do a head of information security for the London Olympic Games in 2012. And I sort of went, I don't really think I can do this, but I had someone who was like, no, you should definitely apply. And I was like, really? But it's like information security, it's IT, I'm really not sure. And anyway, so I applied and I managed to learn enough to speak pretty well at the interview, but he'd already kind of seen me work, if you like. So I probably had that, knew some of my past work experience. And so I got into that role, leading information security, had some very great people working under me who ran the more technical side of the business and the risk side of the business as well. And then I got to kind of run the Olympics. And then during the actual Olympic Games, got to be in the incident response team. And so basically sat in the control room, and there was a phone, and if it rang, kind of shat your pants. Something was going on, and you had to sort of manage it in and amongst the different IT providers that we were using during the games as well. But essentially, it was very successful. And then that's when I came back to New Zealand, very heavily pregnant. So I was actually very, very pregnant, walking around the Olympic Park, checking server rooms, making sure that it was as we expected in the different venues, and no one had tried to stick in wires, or that there weren't any boxes there that shouldn't be. And after that, came back to New Zealand, had baby number one, and then some time off. And then I looked at to get back into work. And I went through a bit of a crisis of confidence. And I thought, maybe I'll just nanny my sister's children for a while, because I've been out of work for a while and not feeling confident. And then my sister was like, no, you need to get a job. And I was like, okay. And then that's when I started to look around properly for jobs, and I ended up getting into a risk management role for Airways New Zealand, which is an air navigation service provider for New Zealand. And obviously lots of risk management is relevant to security. I then had another baby, and then got back into a security role, pulling together all the three threads of security at Airways, including that physical security, personnel security, information security, turning that into a governance program. Had another baby, and then I was asked to do an enterprise business systems manager role. Basically, I was leading the IT team for Airways, so kind of like a quasi-CIO role. So you can see I'm kind of transitioning back into that more IT kind of career. And then after that, I then went and did the Chief Information Security role for the Cordia Group. And so I ran their security for 3 years before coming across over into Microsoft to do the technology strategy role. So again, going from cybersecurity, but then broadening out to technology more broader. But obviously security is always part of everything in technology. So I feel like that move makes sense for me as well. And I really want to kind of play off some of the things that Sasha and Kat said, because I'm really interested, because we talk about learning things in a course, and then we talk about learning things in an organization. And I pretty much learned everything in an organization. I picked up some certs along the way, but it was basically learning from other people and doing the job. It's really important to wonder how relevant is the stuff we learn at uni versus what we learn at work. Does some uni education really help give confidence for the other, or do you not need to necessarily make it in that way? I don't know if some of the other panelists have a view.
I love this question, because I talked about it. I went back to my high school recently to do a sort of careers panel, and three of us were on it. We were talking about from women in technology avenue, and we were talking about this same aspect, because I think we were faced with a whole lot of students looking at us. You can tell they're scared or nervous. Uni's coming up. You have to select this path for yourself. You have to make these decisions now. Do I go to uni? Am I going to, if I go to uni, what do I do? And that was the same thing that I was faced with. I looked at university just like, I have no idea. And I have zero clue. I have zero clue whatsoever. Once I started finding, once I fell across information systems and learnt a lot there, I thought, these are going to be the components, all of the different aspects from this. Whatever I go into in technology, this is going to probably be what I'm taking into it. And the same thing with cybersecurity, the cybersecurity paper. I thought, okay, so this must be maybe what it looks like in practice. It's not. It's it's so different. Where I would say, though, from my experience, that the value from university came was learning. I learned a lot about myself in that, and where my expertise sat, where my skill sets sat, not to the fullest extent. I'm still learning that about myself. In every new role and every new project, I find that everything, it's exactly that. You learn on the job, and you learn more about yourself as you're doing it. But what I found was that I was learning all of these skills at uni that I didn't realize would come into play. It wasn't necessarily about the content and the subjects themselves, but it was the skill sets that they taught you. And for media studies, for example, it was the critical thinking. So much of it was just, okay, here's a subject, here's news, but let's talk about the distortion in media. Let's go down this entire creative avenue. Let's think outside of the box. And so it really teaches you that aspect. And when I was moving, in marketing, I didn't necessarily, it wasn't my full focus in university, but I was forced to do a lot of presentations. And so when I got to, and I love presenting, I love talking, and I love doing that aspect. So, but when I got to ANZ, I remember people going, "Oh my gosh, you like to present?" And I was like, yeah. And we had to do it a lot at uni, gosh, you're doing everything now, it just became the skills that I didn't even realize that I had ended up being the skills that I've used most in practice, or just writing everything down. And I do that because I have ADHD, so that I'm either doodling or I'm writing down what people would say. But in the workplace, I didn't want people to think that I was doodling and not listening. So I would just literally write every single thing that people would say. And that became this wonder who noted everything down and all of those kinds of things. And it was just all of these little skill sets that I didn't realize that I had. And I think it's a continuous learning journey, but I think that's where university was key for me.
So I kind of thought that when I went to uni, when I came out of uni, that it was kind of like getting a driver's license. So you've done all that study, you've done the theory, you've learned to drive with an instructor, but at the end of the day, you get this driver's license, and now you can drive a car on your own. But for the next few months, you're a terrible driver. You don't know what you're doing. You're kind of just on your own, and you're like, what's going on here? What do you think of that, Kat? Same?
Yeah, pretty much. My daughter, from about 8 years old, and she's now 14, has had this thing that she has to know exactly what she's going to do with her life, and she has to know which degree she's going to go, because she's definitely going to university and all these other things. And I keep having to say to her, you don't need to stress about it right now. Mum didn't go to uni until she was 28, and mum still might change her career. We just don't know what's going to happen. So she's a little bit more calm about it now, but she's adamant that she is going to university because, and she doesn't know what she's studying, but I think she, like Sasha was saying, she's recognized that it taught me a lot about myself, and I developed a lot of other skills like time management, like it's really hard if you have ADHD, because I relate to a lot of what Sasha's saying in that aspect. But yeah, time management, learning how to present in front of a room full of people and put together a presentation that actually holds people's interest and gives valuable information, note taking, just general. I didn't come straight out of uni, and they had a class at Unitech that was professional skills for IT practitioners, and it was literally teaching you all those things, like how to run a meeting, how to take meeting notes, how to send a professional sounding email. You know, don't send that email if you're angry. Just put it in your drafts for a little bit and come back to it a few hours later, because that's a paper trail and you can't get rid of it once it's out there. All sorts of little things. And I think for me, because I ended up being handed or gifted the role of the ISACA student president as well for the student group they had at Unitech, didn't have a choice, was given that one. But it did force me to actually go out to some networking events and then start talking to people in industry. And once you get those connections, because cybersecurity in New Zealand is particularly small, like 2 degrees of separation doesn't exist in cyber in New Zealand, it's more like 1, you end up with a whole lot of valuable people on your side.
Yes, you absolutely do. And I think that I didn't know that they were teaching those sorts of skills at uni now. So it's wonderful to hear that they actually are, because they are so important. And I wish that when I went to uni a million years ago, that those were the skills that they were actually teaching, because they are so important. And there's so many of my peers at my age who really should have gone and learned those skills. So it's super interesting to listen to that and hear that they are teaching those skills now. So great. All right, so shifting tack just a little bit now, what I've heard from all of you is that you've all been involved in some shape or form in the softer skills side, or the creative. The word creative has been used quite a lot in the dialogue so far. Now, obviously, we've talked about technology roles and technological aspects, but between the three of you, you've got some level of creativity role inside your workplace at the moment, and inside the work that you do. So I was just wondering, and this is something that has been mooted before, I've heard this topic, and I want to know whether you believe this is a matter of myth, or whether you think there's something real to this. And that statement was actually given by another woman, and it was said that there's a lean towards more creative roles in cyber, such as governance, risk, and compliance. So do you think that's true, or do you think that that's just a myth?
You go, Hilary. There's so many avenues that you can take this.
Well, it's a bit mean to say the technical isn't creative, isn't it?
Well, that's very true. That's true as well. I mean, there is absolute creativity in code. I mean, I've heard lots of people over the years saying that code is art.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
I'm only joshing, to a certain extent.
And good code is art and creative, but there's so much bad code out there that is just formulaic, non-creative. So yeah, I know, I agree.
Yeah, well, we're talking about an industry where you're only as smart as, hackers are always changing tactics, are always coming up with new ways of doing things, that we are only as smart as what we're aware that they're doing. But because of that, I feel like cybersecurity is creativity in a sense, because it's just continuously battling that with new creative ideas, with new ways of battling those, of new ways of not even just looking at cybersecurity as a defense mechanism, but cybersecurity as an enabler as well. How can it help people? There's so many different aspects of cybersecurity, and I think the fact that this is an ever evolving industry just makes it a creative industry as a whole. And I think, to that exact point, code is an art, code is a language, and with that is creativity, and with that is an understanding and building so much knowledge. And there is different levels of logic, creativity. There's so many different points of different ways of thinking, but I think creativity is just inevitable across all of those.
Yeah, I mean, certainly one of the things that I like to think of when I'm having a conversation from the start with somebody in cybersecurity, with a potential customer perhaps, is the fact that everybody understands risk. And that is a creative conversation from the start right there. And if it wasn't for risk, then where would we be with the rest of cybersecurity? What would be the point in the technical aspect? So I really like that answer. It's a fantastic answer. And I just wonder if there is a truth to the fact that we have more women in the, let's not call it the softer side, but let's call it the sort of kind of GRC, kind of the less sort of at the command line, the code basis, the red team. Is that a thing?
Alistair, I want to be a little bit controversial and say that the people's social stuff is the hard stuff. Look, the technology is the coding stuff is easy compared to all of the social interactions and stuff. And so I think you're right. Softer side probably isn't the right term. I think it needs to be the tackling the harder stuff.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've all heard that you're only as strong as your weakest link, and the weakest link is often the people, right? So I personally think it's a really, really important factor, probably the most important factor in cybersecurity. So I'm playing devil's advocate here, just in case you didn't notice.
I mean, if you think about it, to get on the front foot in cybersecurity, you have to be creative. You have to outthink your adversary. So there has to be some sort of level of creativity, whether that is through the use or implementation of technologies, or whether that's through the, risk and strategy work that other areas are doing. And generally in lots of businesses I've interacted with, there seems to be a heavier lean of women in that kind of consulting GRC space, but that's definitely not the case at Defend. And I rounded up some stats prior to this so that I could actually talk to them accurately. But in our SOC team that is run by Ash, my other half, their percentage of women is 42% in that team. So we're nearly equal on that one. And in the technical team as a whole, so the architecture, software development, all that kind of team, we're sitting at 24%, whereas in consulting, there's only 3 out of 21. So that makes 14%. So it's quite skewed the other way at Defend. We've got a lot of females or non-binary persons in the technical roles.
That's wonderful to hear. I'm just, bringing the statistics to this is so important. I think actually the fact that we can start dispelling falsehoods or myths, that's a really powerful thing. So wonderful.
Or use people using anecdotes to try and define what the entire industry is. Well, I see this in my role, so it must be that way everywhere else. And the reality is, I mean, you know me, Alistair, I'm always going to go back to the data and, the statistics that drive across the entire industry rather than just the little slice that I see on a daily basis.
Yeah, totally. All right, well, I think this is probably a good time to then seg into the next topic, which is about inclusion and diversity in the workplace. And really, I think it would be interesting to hear, we've got 3 people on the panel here, and I think it's really great that we have different stories. Everybody's got a slightly different path into the workplace, and now specifically into cybersecurity. Although Hilary, you're kind of cyber and just general tech, but you've all had great experiences in your roles now in cybersecurity. But there are some aspects that are probably the uglier side to diversity and inclusion in the workplace. So I think it's worthwhile bringing these aspects up and really thinking about perhaps the time at which you joined the workplace and where we are today, and maybe if we've reduced issues in this area, or whether it's still really an issue that you've seen. So I think the obvious issues that we need to tackle as an industry overall are things like the gender pay gap, about stereotyping, role models, and perhaps we'll come back to neurodiversity, I think. But there's a number of aspects in that area which I really think that, although they're difficult aspects to talk about, I think it's really important that they get talked about somewhere. And so here we are in a podcast in New Zealand, and we're talking about cybersecurity. So let's touch on those aspects. Who would like to open up on aspects about the gender pay gap and stereotyping and so forth?
It's such a big one to tackle. Hilary, did you want to say?
It is.
I'm happy to go first. So I'd probably just have a couple of thoughts on this. I feel pretty lucky in terms of how I've been treated over the years. I've always worked in male-dominant organizations. Even the Air Force is obviously a very male-dominated organization. I was a psychologist, which is more of a female-dominated role in the Air Force. But then certainly making it into security and then IT space, very male-dominated. In terms of gender pay gap, I think I've done reasonably well, but there was an experience where I was put into one of my first IT leadership roles, and my manager just sort of told me this sort of offhand comment. He's like, oh, you know, HR, they wanted to just give you a small increase on your current salary from your previous job. But I said, no, Hilary's got to earn the same as the exiting male who was just doing this role. Why would she get a whole bunch less just because she's transitioning, you know, different industries and from kind of an individual leadership into management? And so I was very thankful for that. And I mean, that's not something I would have known unless he had actually told me. But I thought, that's interesting. It wasn't my manager who was saying, well, let's pay her less. It was actually the HR team, because they were like, we can get a deal on this person. And sometimes getting a deal on a person isn't very helpful for the person coming into the role. So I think we need to be really mindful of that. As hiring managers, we think we might be doing a good thing for the organization, but it might be really putting the person coming into the role in a very difficult position from a salary perspective. And then I guess the other point I want to talk about here is, and I've sort of alluded to it already, but I think, you know, between male and women, there are differences in terms of how we behave. That's a huge generalization because there are so many individual differences as well. But I think from my own experience, which is the only one I can kind of talk to, I think in the technology and security space, I've definitely had a confidence gap coming into it. And I guess even sitting around IT and kind of management groups, and I have found as the only woman sitting there, and then everyone else is talking really confidently, really loudly about this stuff, and I didn't really understand it, or I was still learning what it was kind of all about. And it took me a while to really find my voice at the table and kind of think to myself, actually, I do ask good questions, and it might be about topic areas that I'm not leading at the moment, but I can ask good questions that take the conversation in a different direction, and I have a place at this table, and I need to make sure that I'm leaning in and bringing that perspective. And then, so I guess myself, I've learned over time that just people talking really loudly and confidently doesn't mean that they really know what they're doing and that they're really
But so Kat, just sorry.
Process that I had to learn and go through to realize, yeah, they don't really know what they're saying that much. I have a place here as well.
I think that's really a really powerful statement there, because, you know, you've got a room full of, well, let's face it, you know, males, and they're all clamoring to shout the loudest, and, you know, that's their way. You know, it must be, as somebody who's not used to that club, coming along and trying to make a difference or actually put their point across. Why, you know, it really feels like coming, you know, starting off, either you could be just somebody younger, but, you know, if you're at a table of influencers, then how do you get into that, and what sort of advice would you have for other women who are just starting off in that position and need to break into? And it feels, that's like me saying break into feels bad. You know, I guess we all have to start somewhere, whether we're just young or whether we're, you know, of the opposite sex. But really, the struggle that we have to feel, that we have to prove ourselves, when you eventually, you know, had a thought to yourself and gone, hold on, I actually have valuable points. I am actually asking important questions here, and I'm not being listened to. That's really, you know, for me, it's upsetting to hear, and it is a reality. And I just, you know, wonder if you've got any advice for other women out there or people who are new to the industry, and how you would help them break into these conversations.
I think a big one is the people. So when you hear someone do that, whether they're male or female, you need to pick them up on it, particularly if you know that they are good. You need to be like, hold on, stop going down this track that you're thinking about in terms of you don't belong there and you're not good enough. Are you kidding me? Look, you're here because of this, and this, and just stop being silly and just kind of try and cut it out of other people as much as possible, or hold a mirror up to their face and go, look how amazing you are. This is exactly why you are there, or it's okay to be different. Gosh, my son found this really cool quote the other day, which was, you have to be odd to be number one. I thought that's so cool. Like, how can we just get people to feel like being the same is not necessarily a good thing? Actually, being different is where the superpower is. So I think we just need to catch people out on it, and also ourselves in our own internal monologue also.
Yeah, I mean, I could go on and talk about, the exclusion that's come out of imposter syndrome for a very long time. And in fact, I was part of a women's panel last year when we talked just about that topic. I was the diversity in the room. But I think what it was really interesting is that you're seeing a very similar thing from that focus group. And I think it's really important to, put yourself first and really, talk yourself up. So a really, really good point there. You also touched a little bit about, well, I think it sounded like you touched a little bit about neurodiversity there. And I think we have, we're all different in terms of neurodiversity. Sasha, you mentioned that, you'd been diagnosed, I think, with ADHD. Is there anything you would say to people who also have, ADHD or other areas on the non-neurodiverse, am I saying it right, spectrum, that would help other people in the industry?
Yeah, I think it's exactly to your point, Hilary, of just leaning into the fact that you are different. I think it is constantly reassuring yourself, because naturally, I know everybody has their own individual challenges, regardless of what they are doing, regardless of the role that they are in. I think that when you have a society and corporations that are naturally built on the foundations that aren't necessarily built for neurodiverse ways of working, it is important to make sure that we are championing that more and more throughout organizations. And I think we are seeing that more and more, that organizations are focusing on these things. But, I find myself coming back to that time management thing. I don't, time management is difficult because I don't have a concept of time. So it's, somebody could say we need to do this in 3 hours. That doesn't mean I know the definition, but it doesn't actually mean anything to me. So I find myself working, twice as hard to do something that comes naturally to people. And the 9 to 5, for example, doesn't necessarily work for me. I get the work done, don't get me wrong, but I don't necessarily do it in a linear fashion like other people would. But with that, it comes back to absolutely right. I'm different. And so I have these superpowers, which I love and which more and more I'm trying to lean into. It's been a very confronting, tough journey of getting diagnosed, and it is tricky, and it is a booking a lot of appointments and a lot of time. And it is a process which it's like they literally took all of the ingredients of ADHD and said, here's the biggest challenge you'll ever see to try to get diagnosed. And having that diagnosis, having that context is key. So I guess, I don't know, and within all of that big spiel, I would say my advice to people would be, if you are seeing traits in yourself, if you are wondering whether you should go through the process, even though there is expenses, even though it is costly, I would say that it has been a life changer. And even regardless of, medication or psychologist journeys that you can go through once you've been diagnosed, the diagnosis itself, having that context, is such a game changer. But then also in the workplace, I won't say that I can confidently say I haven't solved the challenge of being neurodiverse in the workplace. That's an ongoing journey. But the more and more that I lean into my superpowers, is, if we want to call it hyper focusing, the creativity aspect, all of those different things that come with ADHD, the positive traits, leaning into that is so important, and finding a role that suits that as well, that allows you to thrive. And, because ADHD, you might not necessarily be incredible in one role, but cybersecurity, I think, allows you to work with your brain. So many of the different roles, it allows you to work with your brain rather than against it. So, you know, if people are listening to this and they aren't in cybersecurity and they do have ADHD, or their brain is a bit, I like to call it, then maybe it is something to look into, or just reach out to me. I'm happy to chat. I can't stop talking. That's my issue. So
Love it.
yeah.
And I love that my brain is spicy. That's great.
Yeah. I call it my spicy brain.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, a lot of people could be
I think
anxious about. Sorry, go ahead.
I think
John.
that's how we're going to title the episode. My brain is spicy.
My brain is spicy.
Brilliant title.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of people out there that might be anxious about getting that diagnosis. So I think, you know, you're making some really positive statements about, you know, the benefits of having that diagnosis. Another question then about, you know, exclusion from opportunities here. You know, there's Hilary, you've had children, and Kat. So has there been any opportunities in your career that you believe that you've missed out on as a result of that? Like, we could be talking about things as perhaps just simple things like not even being included in particular important meetings as a result of, you know, the scheduling of meetings that have, you know, gone between 9:30 and 2:30 to not cover part-time hours. You know, you might be working part-time hours whilst you're looking after children, or just, you know, areas just in general which, you know, you feel like you've been excluded from aspects that you really should be included in your entire working career as a result of having children.
Do you want to go first, Kat? Or
I haven't experienced it in cyber or in the places that I've been fortunate enough to work, because both of them have had a really good culture in terms of putting family first. So in terms of cyber and my career, no. Uni was a bit challenging sometimes with scheduling of classes. You'd choose your classes and then maybe that class was filled up, so they'd stick you in the night class. And it's like, well, I've got to make sure Ash is home from work at the right time so that I can make it to my class on time. And there were some instances where I did actually have to bring my daughter to class, and she had to sit in with class with me for the first hour or something until Ash could come pick her up. But no, everybody's been pretty accommodating in that aspect for me anyway. Very
good to hear that. Hilary?
yeah, I have to say it has been the same for me, but it's because I had really great managers during my baby delivering days. So yeah, you know, I had managers who were like, this is not a disease, it's just a baby, you will come back to the workforce. And so I was really lucky, because every time I came back from a maternity leave, I got another promotion into another role. So I never had that kind of issue. But I think also in my own head, while I am family first and all about family, I also knew that Hilary Walton had these dreams and desires and things that were outside of family and babies as well. So I always kept some kind of irons hot in the fire through my maternity leaves. So I'm not, yeah. So like my first two maternity leaves, I was writing a book on security culture just because, and I just thought, well, I've learned all this stuff in the Olympics and working, you know, with MI5, I need to get this down into a book. And then in my last maternity leave, I did a directorship, kind of like a future directors program. And yes, I took my baby to the boardroom for the first, I took a month or two off, and then started taking my baby into the boardroom. And they put in a baby in the boardroom policy for me. They were like, we get it, we're totally fine with this, we're all parents ourselves, bring your baby if you want, you know, if they cry, that's totally fine. And so that got me through some of those sort of years as I was trying to juggle lots of different balls. So for me, yeah, it is about looking after, you know, putting your own life mask on first, and then kind of taking care of your family, if that makes sense. Like I had to do those things so that when I got out the other side, I still had a career worth leaving my baby for, because that's the important thing. If you do come out of it too much, you won't be able to get back into kind of the same kind of career that you can. So you've got to set yourself up for the future, or you're paying a lot of money for childcare, but you're doing it because you know there's future earning potential that you don't want to miss out on, if that makes sense. So in my head, it was very much that, you know, leaning into work, just because I was thinking about having a baby or maybe pregnant didn't mean I leaned away from career opportunities, from learning, from promotions. It was just, well, I'll be looking after baby for a while and then I'll be coming back. I need to make sure this is an ongoing thing, not just short-sighted for the first few years of a baby's life, if that makes sense. I hope that doesn't sound like completely careless. I love my family. I'm, a massive family first person, but it can't be just about your family. It needs to be about you and your happiness, because otherwise, if you're not happy, you won't be there for your family to be happy with it either.
Yeah, love yourself first.
Yeah, you've got to take care of yourself. And it's interesting because on the male side of it, to give you ladies a little bit of a perspective. So I was a single father for quite a while. My first wife passed away. And I will tell you that from the other men looking at me, there was absolutely no support. The idea is that, well, you're a man, you should just be able to take care of this. And I'm going, whoa, hold on a second. This is massively complicated. It's massively difficult. There's a lot of work that goes into it. And so I'm glad that you guys have been able to work through that, and it hasn't seriously negatively impacted your career, because I think it brings a perspective to the work that you do.
Yeah. But don't get me wrong. There were periods when in my diary, I would just have meeting, but it was really, I'm going to recital, or I'm taking my baby to the doctor, or, there's things going on. Or there was a period of time when I just didn't even mention I had a family at work, just pretended that I worked 4 days a week for a long period of time so that I could do more things with my children, and I would pretend I was full-time. As far as anyone concerned, I was full-time. So yeah, I've evolved over time to a point where I'm very open to talking about my family, but I didn't feel like I could actually, probably in some of those younger years, even though it was supportive, it was still like, just don't have too much of a family. Do you know what I mean? Can't interrupt the work. But now it is very different, and people integrate it a lot more.
Okay. All right. And in terms of, any other aspects, either negative or positive, in terms of like things like role models or, positive, aspects, is there any aspect you've recalled within the workplace that has been beneficial in your roles? Or do you feel like, because you've found that there are aspects that have been harder because you're women, and like the aspects of not enough mentors, not a little bit of stereotyping or exclusion because you've not been invited to things like the golf club, or is there any of that that's going on?
If I didn't have I would start by saying, if I didn't have my mentors, I wouldn't be where I am. And I know that I'm not super incredibly far into my career, but even at this stage, if I hadn't had the incredible mentors that I have had and continue to have, that I wouldn't be here, and I wouldn't have moved sideways. I wouldn't be as confident in my own work and myself as I am if I hadn't had people champion me, and I hadn't had those people take me under their wing and continue to. If I didn't have that, I would be in such a level stuck, I think, in the imposter syndrome. And I think it would have been a lot, and not that goes away, it's still there, but I think it would be a lot harder to actually see outside of that without having people that support you. And I think that is really hard. And I think that, as you say, I think there's a lot of things in that consideration of, gender considerations, just early career considerations, or just job, role, project, whatever you're doing. It's, I think, just an inherent, I don't know. I feel like it's just consistent questioning of yourself. And so to have people that support you, and I don't necessarily know if that fits with gender. I don't necessarily, I feel like it does in a lot of aspects, but I'll hand over to Kat and Hilary. But yeah, for me, mentors has been the key thing.
Yeah, definitely the same for me. Mentors and people who sponsor you. So, really that kind of advocate when you're not in the room, to be like, no, Hilary's amazing. You need to think about her for the next role. And they sponsor you into the next role. That's male and female mentors that I've had. I've benefited from both genders in that respect. But yeah, so key just to help you kind of see what's next or navigate the next bit. So yeah, wouldn't be here either with the help of all of them.
Yeah, I unfortunately haven't had any female mentors. So I went looking for my own sources of female in the industry inspiration and found people like Hilary on LinkedIn who were doing a great job of sharing and advocating for anybody in the industry, really. But seeing somebody who has kind of got a few similarities to yourself, like the fact that she's female and she's a mum, great. And she's doing amazing work. And then you meet people like I met Sasha at an event and we started talking about the ADHD thing. And it was like, oh my goodness, hey, there's another one of my people. So not so much mentors, but definitely friendships being formed or seeking out my own sources of inspiration. And I guess watching Ash a lot helps because we at home, we work side by side in our little home office. And I get to listen to a lot of the conversations and just the way that they advocate for themselves and what they believe is the right thing to do for the customer, or the language that they use when they're speaking to other people in the industry. It's that stuff's pretty inspiring as well. So it's mostly inspiration for me as opposed to mentorship. I have had some mentors and I'd mostly consider them friends now. But yeah, I don't think I've ever experienced that advocacy and things that Hilary was talking about, and having those people that pump you up definitely makes a difference because, like Sasha said, the imposter syndrome can be crushing. And I'm a perfectionist. It's one of my things in the neurodiversity, and rejection is absolutely crushing. So I have this absolute need to do the best that I possibly can. Sometimes it's very detrimental to me. It makes things take twice as long, or it totally consumes me and I hyper focus. And it can be a bit soul crushing when you get that far down in the rabbit hole. But it's been a personal journey for me.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Sorry, Sasha.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I think I absolutely agree in the sense that beyond mentorship, it is just the people around you in general. I think that you can be in a role, but without you could be in a role for however long, but if there's not the people around you that are there, or if you're not consistently, and that's I agree in the sense of going out and networking and meeting people, and I recognize that that doesn't suit everybody. There's a lot of introverts that's not necessarily their amazing thing that they want to do is go out and meet people, but I think regardless it is important, I think, to help you get out of your own head and to go find people and meet people that meet different aspects of yourself. That for myself, ADHD, for my other women in the industry, people that are, for a very long time I was surrounding myself with, just in Wellington when I was living there, trying to set up a group of women entering cybersecurity because it felt like a nation. Having and opening those conversations and opening that discourse for the different aspects and different people that you relate to, I feel like it's just incredible. And having your supportive partners that uplift you, that's also key. But just people, I think, is just incredible.
Wonderful. All right. So last thing I'm going to ask, and then I'll kind of just open the panel up to whatever. But the last question I was at, and I think we've touched on a number of these aspects so far, but maybe I'll just start with you, Kat. Not picking on you particularly, but what would you say to any aspiring women who want to join cybersecurity? Is there any
just
smoking points? Just do it.
Just do it. There are so many different areas of the career that you can get into. And if you try something and you don't like it, you can move left, you can move up, down, wherever you'd like to go. And meeting people and hearing their stories, or finding those connections, whether it's through social media or whether it's through being introduced by colleagues to other people. Those are particularly valuable because it gives you more of a sounding board. So you've got a variety of people to get advice from, whether it's career advice or whether it's you're struggling with a particular problem. Yeah, it's quite a community when you get into cybersecurity, and we're all there to support each other.
That's great to hear. Hilary.
So my call out is, I think I'm sort of becoming more and more concerned that people think technology is a separate thing over here, when I think in reality, organizations aren't going to be organizations, they're going to be technology organizations. And also, even if we think of AI, like it's not just for the technology people anymore, it's for the consumer. So I think people need to change their mindsets and get into thinking that technology is for everyone. be it cyber, be it AI, and even in particular the emerging technologies as well, like Web3, metaverse, even cryptocurrency. I'm not here, I don't care whether you think that's a thing or not, or I'm not here to convince you that it's a good thing to get into. It's not about that. But I really, really want people to lean into technology and emerging technology, because it is going to be such a big market in the future. They're sort of saying numbers like 10 trillion in the next 5 years for Web3. And if women and minorities and everyone doesn't lean into it, they're going to miss out. And I don't want that to happen. So I think everyone needs to lean into technology. Technology is for everyone. That's kind of my play at the moment.
Yeah, I think you're totally right, because I mean, I've almost got to the point where because we're in the information age, right? Thereabouts. We're not in the industrial age anymore, and we're probably going towards some people have called the knowledge age. But regardless, the word technology has positive connotations, but also has this negative to talk about what you're saying there. And this negative thing is that
but it's not.
It's kind of like something that's reserved for scientists or technologists, or people who are geeks or whatever, which is totally not the case. And it's so important that we know that the technology and information go hand in hand. So that's why we're calling it the information age. And I'd love to see more people go through that level of discourse that actually says, well, hold on, it's about information, and why information is the oil or the gold of our age. It's not about the oil in the sand anymore. It's about the information, the data that we hold, and that's important to so many organizations, pretty much every organization today. So yeah, very good point there, Hilary. Sasha.
Yeah, I feel like I'm just on the same wavelength of just do it and it's for everybody, but it's fashionable. So it's it's true.
Oh, if it was only cool, Alistair, when you and I had first gotten into technology.
I think one of my favorite things is like going to like family events or meeting new people, and they go, oh, what do you do? And I go, oh yeah, I work in cybersecurity, waiting for for them to go, oh, that's cool. Whoa, that's cyber. Oh my gosh. So it's fashionable. It's a fun punchline. That won't be my advice though. Please just do it because I feel like we need that growth. We need to continue to change that narrative in so many of the different areas where we're talking about all of these myths, where we're talking about so many different aspects of cyber and stereotypes and everything. We need more and more people and diverse people to come in and change and help change these narratives. And beyond that, it's such a perfect time to get into it, where we're in this unique opportunity of having this incredible industry which doesn't have all of these high barriers of entry necessarily at this stage. So it's such a unique position to be in for people entering cybersecurity from whatever walks of life, whether that's from different industries, different careers, coming out of uni, coming from high school. It doesn't necessarily matter right now, because you can just, and hopefully it does remain that way. But I know that when industries grow, they do tend to build criteria to come into. But I think we are in a really unique opportunity right now.
Yeah, and let's not forget neurodiversity as well. That's something I think is being
We've
more and more understood. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Ash and I talk about diversity cards all the time, that generally holding more than one. So being a woman is one aspect of your diversity, but being a mum could be another aspect. Being part of the rainbow community, your national heritage could be part of your diversity, and your neurodivergency. So you've got a whole hand of various perspectives and lived experiences that you bring to whatever role it is that you work towards.
Such wonderful words. Yeah, that's awesome. Anything else? Sorry, Sean. Go ahead.
I was going to say it's interesting. We're moving towards, and Hilary touched on this. The technology is just going to be part of business. It just, that's the direction we're going, and we're going towards this path of hyper personalization, where businesses are aimed at individuals rather than segments, whether they be women or men or over an age or another. It's going to be no. I'm aiming my business at a particular individual. And I need to be able to deal with them. And so having those diverse viewpoints and having different perspectives and Kat, to your point, different diversity cards that you can bring to that discussion helps make that hyper personalization possible and makes it successful. So a business that's a stodgy business is like, no, I'm just aiming at, over 40 white men that, have a certain amount of income. That's all I'm going to aim at. Those companies aren't going to be around in 5 years, because a company that can come in and can diversify across, individual segments in a way that they can be successful. And the only way they can do that is by having different perspectives. And Alistair, I think that's why we wanted to do this panel, is we wanted to showcase the value and the superstar powers of having that diversity. And I really want to thank all three of you for coming on the panel, because it was hugely powerful and inspiring for me.
Yeah, I'd say I've absolutely loved every minute of this. It's just listening to the different versions of the stories. It's been so cool. Any other point before we wrap this up?
Just feel free to call me if anyone wants to chat on cybersecurity or technology.
Yep.
Just always, happy to help.
That was
To that point, Hilary.
Yeah,
that point, Hilary. If people want to find you, how would they find you online?
So I'm pretty much Hils Walton everywhere, be that kind of LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, or reach out to me on hilswalton@gmail.com.
Perfect.
Awesome. And
Kat, how would if somebody wanted to reach out, if they were interested, how would they reach out to you?
LinkedIn probably my preference, and I am Kat Lennox-Steele on there.
Perfect. Sasha?
Yeah, same. I am on LinkedIn. See me across as well, coming through Tech Woman NZ as well, just because I'm heavily involved in the subcommittee there. So you'll probably, if you're involved with that or keen to look into Tech Woman NZ, you'll see myself there, but mainly LinkedIn, Sasha Mullins. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Sasha, you and I have actually been bumped into each other on a couple Tech Women events in the last year and a half. And I hadn't thought about that. I hadn't thought about that until you had just now mentioned it. Alistair, and how can people find you?
Oh, yes, just the usual ways. So LinkedIn, Alistair J. Ross, and you can get me on YouTube. You can search for Revolution InfoSec NZ, or you can get my own geeky channel, Al's Geek Lab, and there's the usual Twitter and stuff like that as well, but or X as we call it now, right?
Yes, X, formerly Twitter. Yeah, I think that's going to be interesting. And I'm Sean Muller. Yeah, you could find me at Sean G Muller anywhere on pretty much all the social media platforms. Yeah, just reach out to us.
Yeah. All right. Thanks very much for listening. This has been a Technology Whisperers podcast, and we'll be back in 2 weeks' time. Until then, take care and have a good one.